Welcome to my YouTube channel. Here, we uncover the truth about money, success, and the stories they don't want you to know. Every week, we dive into powerful lessons, real-life journeys, and strategies that can help you build wealth and take control of your future. If you're ready to change the way you think about money, you're in the right place. Let's get started. The rain tapped against the narrow window of his apartment like an impatient visitor who would not leave. Malik sat at the edge of his worn-out mattress, staring at the faded bills stacked on the floor, their edges curling like old leaves. He had counted them 3 times already, and still the numbers didn't change. Not enough for rent, not enough for food, not enough for anything. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands pressed against his forehead as if the weight of his thoughts could crush him. For most of his 35 years, life had felt like a staircase missing too many steps. Every time he climbed, he slipped. Every time he tried, the floor caved in. His father had once told him, "Money isn't real until you make it mean something." Malik never truly understood those words. Not until the night everything changed. It began with a letter. A strange envelope slipped beneath his door. No stamp, no name, only his written in sharp black ink across the front. He almost threw it away, thinking it was another debt notice, but something about the weight of it made him pause. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message written neatly in cursive. "The money story they don't want you to know has been hidden in plain sight. If you want answers, come to the rooftop of the old Lexington building, midnight." Malik stared at it, confused. It felt like a prank, maybe a cruel joke. Who would waste their time sending riddles to a man who had nothing? Yet the words clung to him like a shadow. Midnight came, and despite every reason not to, he found himself walking through the silent streets, the paper folded tightly in his pocket. The Lexington building stood like a relic from another century, its bricks weathered, its windows broken, graffiti covering its sides. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step echoing in the hollow structure. By the time he reached the rooftop, the city spread out beneath him like a restless machine, lights flickering, cars honking, neon signs glowing. A figure stood at the edge, back turned, coat billowing in the cold wind. Malik's chest tightened. He almost turned to leave, but the man spoke without looking. "You came," the voice said, deep and calm. "Most people don't." "Who are you?" Malik asked, his voice carrying more fear than strength. The man turned. He was older, maybe in his late 60s, his skin lined with years, but his eyes, sharp, alive, like they saw everything. He smiled faintly. "I'm someone who learned the truth a long time ago. The truth about money, about why men like us are always kept at the bottom while others climb higher without effort. The system isn't broken, Malik. It was built this way." Hearing his name made Malik step back. "How do you know me?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he pulled a small leather book from his coat pocket and held it out. "This," he said, "isn't about who I am. It's about who you could become." The Malik hesitated, but took the book. The leather was worn, the pages filled with symbols, notes, strange diagrams, and stories of people who had turned dust into gold, debt into power. The man said, "Contains the story they never want you to know, the story of how wealth is really made, not by chance, not by luck, not even by hard work alone, but by understanding the hidden rules. Once you see them, you can't unsee them." The man's eyes narrowed. "But beware. Knowledge is dangerous. Some will fight to keep you ignorant." And then, before Malik could ask another question, the man walked past him, disappearing down the stairs, leaving only the echo of his footsteps. Malik stood there, trembling, clutching the book like a lifeline. That night, under the glow of a flickering streetlight, he opened the first page and began to read. What he found inside would change everything. The first pages were not what Malik expected. No promises of instant riches, no golden secrets screaming out like a commercial. Instead, the book spoke in riddles, short sentences scribbled in neat handwriting. Money is not paper. It is trust. Trust is not given. It is built. Beneath those words, a diagram showed circles connected by lines, each labeled with names he didn't recognize. Ancient merchants, kings, bankers, families whose power stretched back centuries. Malik frowned, flipping through the pages. He found more notes. The poor chase money. The wealthy create systems. The powerful control rules. There were stories of men who started with nothing but an idea, who bent entire markets to their will by understanding how people thought, how fear and desire guided every exchange. His chest tightened as he read. These weren't just notes, they felt like warnings. In one section, a line had been underlined 3 times. The first prison is debt. The second is ignorance. The third is fear. Malik closed the book, his head spinning. He wanted to laugh, to throw it across the room. How could some old man's notebook help him when he could barely pay his landlord? But when he tried to sleep, the words haunted him. He thought about the times he had been denied jobs despite his qualifications, the times he watched others rise while he sank, the endless bills, the endless wait. Maybe, just maybe, there was truth in it. Over the next week, Malik read every night. The book told of patterns in markets, the way money flowed like a river toward those who built dams and channels to redirect it. It spoke of compound growth, but not just in savings, growth of influence, networks, information. It described how entire communities had been deliberately locked out of these secrets, taught to spend instead of build, taught to survive instead of expand. The more Malik read, the more he felt a fire inside him. But fire alone didn't pay bills. He needed proof. He needed something real. It came one afternoon while he was working his part-time job unloading trucks at a warehouse. He noticed the waste, pallets of goods thrown aside, products discarded because of minor packaging flaws. Malik remembered a passage from the book, Where Others See Waste, Wealth Waits. That night, he asked his supervisor if he could take some of the discarded items home. The man shrugged. Take whatever you want, it's garbage to us. Malik began selling those items online, carefully at first. To his surprise, people paid good money for things the warehouse considered worthless. In a month, he made more than he earned from his paycheck. It was small, but it was proof. The book had been right. But with every step forward, he felt a shadow watching him. A black SUV parked outside his building more than once. Strangers seemed to stare at him too long. One evening, as he left a small cafe where he had been studying, a man in a gray suit approached him. "You're Malik, right?" the stranger asked, his voice smooth, too casual. Malik froze. "Who's asking?" The man smiled thinly. "Let's just say some people are curious about where you got that book. Be careful who you trust. Knowledge like that doesn't stay hidden without reason." Malik's stomach tightened. Before he could ask anything, the man walked away, blending into the city crowd. That night, Malik couldn't sleep. He opened the book again, his hands trembling. On the last page, written in bold ink, were words he hadn't noticed before. "When they find you, don't run, stand. Because if you run, they win. If you stand, you build." Malik stared at the sentence for a long time. Something inside him hardened. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just reacting to the world. He was learning to shape it. The following months were a blur of determination. He studied markets, trends, and human behavior the way the book had shown him. He saved every dollar he earned from reselling discarded goods and reinvested it. He taught himself how to read financial statements, how to understand supply and demand shifts before others noticed. He began to see patterns everywhere. The way people bought in panic, the way companies cut corners, the way small opportunities could be scaled if handled with precision. Slowly, his apartment changed. The stacks of unpaid bills disappeared, replaced by stacks of notes, journals, and plans. His phone buzzed with orders every day. His bank account grew. But so did the feeling that he was being watched. One night, as he left the warehouse after talking to an old co-worker, he found his door ajar. His apartment had been searched. The book was gone. Panic shot through him. He tore the place apart, but it wasn't there. His chest burned with rage. The one thing that had started everything, the one thing that gave him the map, was gone. He sat on the floor, breathing hard, his fists clenched. And then something strange happened. He realized he didn't need the book anymore. The knowledge was already inside him. The lessons weren't bound to the leather cover. They were his now. For the first time, Malik felt no fear. He stood, looked around his small apartment, and whispered, "Take it. I'll write my own." And so he did. He began keeping his own journal, documenting everything he learned, everything he tried, everything that worked and failed. His business grew beyond discarded goods. He found suppliers, negotiated deals, built connections. He studied how money moved through neighborhoods, how banks treated certain clients differently, how investment firms bet on fear and hope. Malik wasn't just surviving anymore. He was building. And somewhere in the city, in some quiet corner, someone was watching. Waiting, testing, because Malik's story was only beginning, and the truth was far more dangerous than he ever imagined. The city felt different to Malik now. The noise of traffic, the glow of signs, the rhythm of people rushing through their routines. It was no longer just chaos. It was data. It was information. Every shout from a vendor, every flash sale, every boarded-up storefront told him something about the way money lived and moved. He wrote obsessively in his journal, filling page after page with observations. The book that had been taken from him had opened the door, but now he was building a doorway of his own. At night, he cross-checked prices on trading apps, studying how small shifts in global events rippled into local markets. When a storm delayed shipments, he anticipated shortages and bought products before they spiked. When new laws hit certain industries, he saw where people would panic and where he could step in calmly. It wasn't glamorous. Malik still woke up in the same cramped apartment, still wore the same old jacket, still carried a secondhand phone. But in his bank account, something extraordinary was happening. The numbers kept climbing, at first a few hundred, then a few thousand, then tens of thousands. He didn't celebrate. He didn't tell anyone. He understood now that silence was protection. But the world has a way of noticing when a man begins to rise. One evening, he attended a small community meeting at a church hall. Neighbors gathered to discuss rising rents, job losses, the usual struggles. Malik sat quietly, listening until a woman stood up and said, "We need people who understand money, who can guide us, not just talk. We need someone who knows how this system really works." The crowd murmured in agreement, tired faces looking for hope. Malik felt a weight in his chest. He wanted to stand, to speak, but the words froze in his throat. Who was he to lead anyone? He was just a man with a stolen story and a journal full of scribbles. When the meeting ended, as he walked out into the night, an old woman grabbed his hand. Her eyes were sharp, knowing. "You've been learning, haven't you?" she whispered. Malik's heart jumped. "What do you mean?" he asked. She only smiled. "I can see it. Don't hide it forever." Then she let go and disappeared into the crowd. For days, her words echoed in his head. Don't hide it forever. It was around this time that Malik received a message he couldn't ignore. An email with no sender, no subject line, only a single sentence. "If you want to know the truth about the ones watching you, meet us at Pier 17, midnight." He almost deleted it. He almost convinced himself it was another trap. But curiosity was a stronger chain than fear. At midnight, the pier was silent except for the creak of old wood and the whisper of the tide. Malik waited, his hands cold in his pockets. Then a group of figures emerged from the shadows. 3 men and 1 woman, all dressed plainly, their eyes scanning the darkness. "You're Malik?" one of them said. He nodded, tense. The woman stepped forward. "We're not your enemies, but we know who took the book from you, and we know why." Malik's heart raced. "Ooh," she hesitated, then spoke in a low voice. "There are families, old families, that control the flow of wealth, not just banks, not just corporations. They've built the system for centuries. That book you had wasn't just a collection of notes. It was a key, a map, and the man who gave it to you knew they would come for it." Malik swallowed hard. "So what happens now?" One of the men pulled a folded piece of paper from his coat and handed it over. On it was an address, nothing else. "Go there," he said. "You'll find answers. But understand this, once you open the next door, there's no turning back." Before Malik could ask another question, they melted back into the night, leaving him alone with the sound of waves slapping against the pier. He stared at the address for a long time. A warehouse on the edge of the city. 2 nights later, Malik stood before it. The building was abandoned, windows cracked, rust streaking down its walls. He pushed the heavy door open and stepped inside. The air smelled of dust and old oil. Faint light spilled from a single lamp in the center of the room, where a man sat at a table, waiting. It was the same man from the rooftop. Older, warier, but unmistakable. "You've done well," the man said, his voice steady. "Better than I expected." Malik froze. "You gave me the book. They took it." "What was it really?" The man leaned back in his chair. "It was proof. Proof that knowledge exists outside their reach. Proof that the game isn't unwinnable. But the book itself was never the real treasure. The real treasure is what you've done with it. You've already passed the first test." Malik's fists tightened. "Then why let them take it from me?" "Because," the man said quietly, "if you can't build without it, then you never deserved it in the first place." Malik's anger cooled into realization. He had been forced to rely on himself, on what he learned, not on the book as a crutch. The man was right. The older figure leaned forward, his eyes burning with intensity. "Now, Malik, you have a choice. You can keep building quietly, amassing wealth for yourself, never drawing attention. Or you can step into the light, risk everything, and challenge the system that was built to keep you beneath it." Silence filled the warehouse. The weight of the choice pressed against Malik's chest like an iron bar. Finally, he spoke. "I've been in the dark my whole life. I won't hide anymore." The man's lips curled into a faint smile. "Then your real story begins now?" The warehouse meeting left Malik shaken, but sharper than ever. He walked home through empty streets, the city glowing like a beast that never slept. His mind spun with the man's words. Wealth for himself or risk everything to challenge the system? It wasn't a decision that could be made in a single night, yet deep inside, Malik already knew his answer. He had lived the struggle, tasted the fear, felt the weight of a world designed to bury him. If there was a chance to change it, not just for him, but for others like him, he couldn't look away. The days that followed felt like preparation for a war no one else could see. Malik expanded his small ventures, moving beyond discarded goods into real investments. He learned to watch the markets like a predator waiting for weakness. He studied government policies, tax codes, loopholes, the invisible gears that determined who thrived and who fell. The book had taught him to look behind the curtain, and now the curtain was everywhere. One night, while scrolling through an obscure forum on his old laptop, he stumbled upon discussions of shadow markets, systems that operated parallel to the official economy, not illegal but invisible, networks where capital moved silently through trusts, shell companies, and offshore accounts. Malik read until dawn, his heart pounding. The words matched what the rooftop man had hinted at. The powerful didn't just make money, they erased their tracks, creating structures so layered that no one could follow the trail. He tested the waters. With the money he had saved, he established a small LLC, then a second under a different name. He funneled profits from his online ventures into one, expenses into the other, and for the first time, he felt the thrill of playing on the same board the wealthy used. It wasn't about hiding. It was about moving differently. But with growth came risk. Late one evening, as he left a meeting with a supplier, a dark sedan rolled up beside him. The windows slid down, and inside sat the man in the gray suit, the same one who had warned him months ago. "You're moving fast," the man said smoothly. Too fast. Malik kept walking, his pulse spiking, but the car crept along beside him. "You think no one is watching? You think the families don't see a man like you climbing where you're not supposed to?" The man's smile was cold, cheerful. "Malik, you're playing a game that was never meant for you." The car pulled away, disappearing into the night, leaving Malik's anger burning. He didn't stop walking until he reached his apartment. He sat in the dark for hours, fists clenched, teeth grinding. They wanted him to be afraid. They wanted him to crawl back into silence. Instead, Malik doubled down. He poured himself into building not just wealth, but community. He began quietly mentoring a few young men in his neighborhood, teaching them the basics of saving, investing, and spotting opportunities others missed. They looked at him with disbelief at first, but when their small gains turned real, their eyes lit up. Word spread slowly. Malik wasn't just a hustler, he was a builder. But as his influence grew, so did the shadows around him. He noticed people tailing him on the subway. His phone glitched with strange static during calls. Some nights, he woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway outside his apartment, footsteps that stopped right at his door before vanishing. Still, he pressed on. It all came to a head one stormy night when his phone buzzed with an unknown number. He answered and a distorted voice spoke. "You've chosen your side. Meet us where it began." Midnight, the rooftop of the Lexington building. Malik climbed the same worn stairs, heart pounding. The city spread below him, rain falling in silver sheets. And there, waiting, was the old man once again. This time he wasn't alone. Several figures stood behind him, faces half hidden in the storm. "You've done well," the old man said, his voice carrying through the wind. "You've built without the book. You've stood when they tried to make you run. Now comes the true test." Malik's jaw tightened. "What test?" The old man stepped closer, eyes burning with intensity, to decide if you will remain a player in their game or if you will become a writer of new rules. Because once you rewrite the rules, Malik, there is no going back. They will not just watch you. They will come for you. They will try to erase you. The rain pelted against Malik's face as he stood silent, the storm inside him matching the one above. He thought of the bills that once buried him, the laughter of those who had doubted him, the faces of the young men he had begun to guide. He thought of the warning in the book, when they find you, don't run, stand. Malik lifted his chin, then let them come. A ripple of energy passed through the group, the storm itself seeming to still for a moment. The old man smiled faintly. Good, he said, because the money story they don't want you to know is not just about wealth. It's about power. And power, Malik, is the most dangerous currency of all. The figures behind him stepped forward, and for the first time, Malik realized he was no longer alone. There were others like him, fighters, builders, survivors who had chosen to stand against the machine, and together they were about to write a story that could shake the world. The night of the rooftop meeting never left Malik. The faces of those who stood beside the old man were burned into his memory. Men and women who carried themselves with quiet strength, as though they had also walked through fire and learned to stand. He didn't know their names yet, but he knew he wasn't alone anymore. For the first time, he felt part of something larger than himself. In the weeks that followed, Malik was invited to secret gatherings, not grand halls or boardrooms, but basements, abandoned warehouses, quiet apartments where the hum of refrigerators drowned out whispered conversations. The group called themselves the Architects. Each of them had once been an outsider, someone the system tried to bury. Each of them had learned the rules, broken them, and begun to write their own. Malik listened more than he spoke. He absorbed their knowledge, the way some of them manipulated real estate markets without owning a single property, the way others built companies that existed on paper yet generated streams of income, the way they funneled wealth into community projects without leaving a trail that the powerful could shut down. It was the book, but alive, living proof. But Malik's hunger grew. He wasn't satisfied with survival. He wanted transformation. He wanted to take the system that had choked him his whole life and bend it until it broke. It started with housing. Malik knew his neighborhood better than anyone. The cracked sidewalks, the shops barely holding on, the families suffocating under rent hikes. He studied property records late into the night, tracing ownership, shell companies, and landlords who treated people like disposable income streams. And then, quietly, strategically, he began buying, not with his own name, through networks of LLCs, trusts, and partners who owed him favors. Malik acquired property that others overlooked. Buildings with broken windows, forgotten by wealthy developers, but full of people who needed stability. Instead of hiking rents, Malik stabilized them. Instead of neglect, he invested in repairs. Families noticed. Word spread. A new kind of landlord was in their midst, not one who drained, but one who built. It made him enemies. One afternoon, as he stepped out of a corner store, a car screeched to a stop across the street. A window rolled down, and a voice shouted, "Stay in your lane." "Malik!" Then the car sped off, leaving dust and silence in its wake. He stood frozen for a moment, then walked home with a fire burning in his chest. They saw him now. They felt him, and that meant he was on the right path. The Architects rallied behind him. Some provided legal shields, helping him hide ownership layers so deep that tracing them became a maze. Others funneled him contacts, contractors who owed loyalty only to each other, not to the system that had failed them. Malik's network grew, and with it, his influence. But so did the danger. It came late one night in the form of a knock at his door. Too firm, too deliberate, Malik opened it to find the man in the gray suit again, rain dripping from his shoulders. "You've crossed the line," the man said flatly. "This isn't about discarded goods or small ventures anymore. You're touching their assets now, housing Malik. That's sacred ground. You think they'll let you rewrite the rules there?" Malik's voice was steady. "I'm not asking permission." The man studied him, eyes cold and sharp. "Then understand this. They don't just erase people like you. They erase legacies, families, histories, entire stories vanish. Do you want your name to disappear into silence?" For a moment, Malik felt a flicker of fear. But then he thought of the families whose lights stayed on because of him, the kids who laughed in the hallways of buildings no longer crumbling, the young men he mentored who now spoke about saving instead of surviving. He squared his shoulders. "My story isn't theirs to erase," he said quietly. "And I'm not the only one writing it anymore." The man stared at him, then gave a slow, thin smile. "We'll see." He turned and walked away, leaving Malik standing in the doorway with rain seeping into his shirt. From that night forward, Malik knew the game had escalated. His phone calls grew stranger, filled with static and interruptions. His bank flagged transactions, freezing accounts without explanation. City inspectors appeared unannounced, citing violations that made no sense. The system was pressing back. But Malik pressed harder. He diversified, moving money into digital assets, cryptocurrencies, and decentralized networks that couldn't be seized with the stroke of a pen. He built businesses that didn't rely on banks or gatekeepers, platforms that connected directly with people who were hungry for alternatives. The architects fed him information, shielding him, guiding him, but even they warned him, the higher you climb, the colder the air becomes. Still, Malik climbed, and then came the invitation, a sleek envelope delivered to his mailbox, embossed with a golden crest he didn't recognize. Inside a single card, Mr. Malik, you are cordially invited to a private gathering of investors and leaders at the Grand Marquette Hotel. Midnight. Attendance is mandatory. Malik held the card for a long time, his stomach tight. He knew what it meant. The families, the system, they were calling him out. When the night came, he dressed in his best suit, sharp but understated. He arrived at the hotel, its marble floors gleaming, chandeliers glittering like frozen stars. Men and women in tailored suits moved like predators through the lobby, their conversations low and sharp. A host led him into a private room where a long table stretched under dim lights. At its head sat a man with silver hair and eyes that seemed carved from stone. Around him others waited, their faces calm but their presence heavy. "Malik," the man said, his voice smooth and commanding. "We've been watching you. You've done well for yourself, but you're interfering with a balance older than you can imagine." Malik took a seat, meeting their eyes one by one. "I'm not interfering," he said. "I'm correcting." A murmur rippled through the table. The silver-haired man leaned forward. "You misunderstand. Wealth is not about fairness. It is about order. We allow some to rise, and we allow most to remain beneath. That is how stability is maintained. And you," his voice sharpened, "you are disorder." Malik's pulse pounded, but he didn't look away. "Then maybe disorder is overdue." The room fell into silence. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the silver-haired man smiled thinly. "Very well. If you insist on standing against us, you may have your architects, your networks, your little victories. But understand, Malik, we are the story." "Story? You are just a chapter." "And chapters can be erased." Malik stood, his jaw tight, his heart a hammer in his chest. He looked around the table, memorizing every face. "Erase me if you can, but I've already taught others to read, and once people learn the story for themselves, they don't forget." He walked out of the room, leaving silence behind him. That night, as he returned to his neighborhood, Malik felt the full weight of what was coming. The system had acknowledged him. The war was no longer hidden. It was open. And he was ready. The air outside the Grand Marquette felt heavier than when Malik had entered. The city lared brighter, the horns sharper, the wind colder. He walked quickly, his fists deep in his pockets, as though every stranger on the street could be a pair of eyes sent to follow him. He had seen the faces of the system. He had spoken to them, stared into their calm, confident expressions, and he knew now more than ever they weren't going to let him walk free without a fight. For the next few days, his world unraveled with precision. One of his LLCs was flagged for suspicious activity, accounts frozen with no warning. A supplier he had relied on for months suddenly cut ties, claiming higher orders. Demanded it. Even the young men he mentored began receiving anonymous threats, messages that made them look at him with fear in their eyes. It was coordinated, designed not to crush him all at once, but to tighten the rope slowly, to make him choke on doubt. Malik felt the weight of it, but he didn't break. He called his architects together. They met in a quiet room above a shuttered bar, their faces grim. "They've seen you," one of them said. "You've made yourself a target. They're cutting your lines one by one." Malik leaned forward, his voice low but steady. "Then we build new lines, lines they can't cut. They think I'm just a man. They don't understand I'm a mirror. I'm not the only one." The room went silent, his words sinking in. Then the old man from the rooftop, who rarely spoke, gave a slow nod. "Then it's time you stopped playing defense, Malik. It's time you struck first." Those words burned in Malik's chest. Strike first? He began with information. Through contacts in the architects, He accessed records not meant for public eyes, tax filings of shell companies, quiet donations funneled through charities that existed only on paper, contracts between city officials and faceless corporations. He mapped them out night after night, his walls covered with papers, strings connecting names, dates, accounts. It was the story behind the story. And when he released it, it shook the city, not in the form of a manifesto or a speech. No, Malik was smarter than that. He leaked pieces, fragments of the truth, through anonymous channels, forums, journalists desperate for scraps of authenticity. One week, a senator's offshore accounts appeared in the news. Another week, a major developer was exposed for laundering money through fake projects. Malik's fingerprints were nowhere, but his fire was everywhere. The people noticed. On the streets, in barbershops, in churches, they whispered about the cracks in the system. They spoke Malik's name, not always aloud, but in looks and nods, in the quiet understanding that someone was fighting back. The retaliation was swift. One night, Malik came home to find his apartment ransacked. Papers shredded. Laptop destroyed, furniture overturned. On the wall, scrawled in red paint, were 3 words, S-T-O-R, Decipr. For a long time, he stood in the silence of the wreckage. Then, slowly, he sat at his table, pulled out a fresh notebook, and began writing again. If they wanted him to stop, he would double his pace. If they wanted him gone, he would become unerasable. But danger was no longer abstract. 2 nights later, as he walked home from a meeting, a black SUV pulled up beside him. The door swung open, and before he could react, hands grabbed him, pulling him inside. The ride was silent. 2 men sat beside him, their grips like steel, faces blank. Malik didn't fight. He saved his strength. They drove to the edge of the city, where warehouses stood abandoned and the river cut through the dark. He was dragged into a building, shoved into a chair beneath a hanging light. Across from him, the silver-haired man from the market sat calmly, sipping from a glass of water. "You should have listened," the man said. His tone was casual, almost disappointed. "We warned you. You had your chance to enjoy your little victories quietly, but you wanted to fight. Now, Malik, you will pay." Malik's chest rose and fell, but his eyes never dropped. "You're afraid," he said. The man's lips curled faintly. "Afraid?"
Yes,
Malik said softly. "If I was nothing, you wouldn't bother? If I was no threat, you wouldn't send your dogs? You're afraid because I'm not alone anymore, because people are listening, because the story you wrote is cracking." The silver-haired man's smile vanished. For a moment, silence pressed down like a weight. Then he gestured to his men. "Erase him!" The 2 guards moved forward, but before they reached him, the warehouse doors burst open. Figures stormed in, shadows moving with precision. The architects. The old man at their front, his voice sharp and commanding. Chaos erupted. Shouts, fists, the crash of metal and wood. Malik was pulled from the chair, dragged through the storm of bodies until he spilled out into the night air, his lungs burning with freedom. The SUV screeched as one of the architects jumped behind the wheel, and they sped into the darkness with Malik in the backseat, heart pounding, adrenaline surging. When they finally stopped in a safe house miles away, Malik sat on the floor, his head in his hands. The old man crouched beside him. "Ooh, they've marked you now," he said quietly. "There is no hiding anymore." Malik lifted his head, his eyes blazing. "Good, then let them see me." The safe house was dim and quiet, its walls lined with peeling paint and the faint hum of an old refrigerator. Malik sat in the silence, his hands trembling slightly from the adrenaline that still raced in his veins. He had come so close, closer than ever, to being erased, and yet he was still here. Alive, breathing. That alone was a victory. But the old man's words haunted him. There was no hiding anymore. Malik knew what that meant. He could no longer move only in the shadows, whispering truths into hidden corners of the internet. They had seen his face. They had dragged him from the street. They had marked him openly. The system had declared war on him, and war demanded more than silence. The next morning, he walked through his neighborhood streets. Vendors opened their shops, children hurried to school. The familiar rhythm of survival pulsed in the air. People glanced at him, some nodding, some looking away. They didn't know the full story yet, but they felt something. Malik could see it in their eyes. Curiosity, suspicion, hope. He realized then that the system's greatest weapon wasn't money or power. It was invisibility, making people believe they were too small, too powerless to fight back. If he was to strike truly, He had to make himself visible. That week, Malik began recording not speeches from polished studios or glossy productions. He sat in his worn-down apartment, a single light above him, speaking straight into a secondhand camera. His words were raw, unpolished, but they carried weight. He spoke about what he had learned, the way debt was used as chains, the way housing was manipulated, the way money moved not toward the hardest workers, but toward those who controlled rules. He didn't reveal names or faces yet, but he revealed truths. The videos spread faster than he expected. At first, through small channels, then into wider circles. People shared them in group chats, played them in barber chairs, posted clips with captions like, "Finally," someone saying it plain. Malik's voice wasn't polished like a politician's, but it was real. And real was dangerous. The silver-haired man's warning echoed in his head, "We are the story. You are just a chapter." But now Malik was proving otherwise. He wasn't a chapter, he was a spark. And sparks spread. The retaliation shifted, no longer just quiet threats or frozen accounts. Smear campaigns began. Articles appeared calling him a fraud, a con man, a dangerous radical. His name was dragged through news cycles, his face plastered beside words like "or trustworthy" and "criminal." Old records were dug up, mistakes magnified, lies mixed with half-truths until the line blurred. But something unexpected happened. People didn't believe it. They had been lied to too many times before. They had seen too many scapegoats, too many voices silenced under the same tired labels. Instead of turning against him, they defended him. They posted his words with captions like, "They're scared of him, that's why they're lying." And Malik realized something powerful. Once trust was built with the people, no amount of propaganda could break it. Still, danger followed closely. Anonymous calls filled his nights, voices promising death. Once, a car followed him for hours until he slipped into a crowded market. Another time, his apartment caught fire under suspicious circumstances, though he escaped before it spread. Each attempt only hardened him further. The architects urged caution, but Malik pushed forward. He began holding small gatherings, first in church basements, then in community centers, then in warehouses where hundreds showed up to listen. He didn't speak as a leader above them. He spoke as one of them, sharing tools, teaching strategies, breaking down the hidden rules he had once only read about in a secret book. And slowly, he watched something shift. People began acting. Neighbors pooling money to buy back property instead of letting developers snatch it. Young men and women starting small ventures, refusing to drown in predatory loans. Families learning to save, invest, protect themselves. The systems still loom large, but cracks were spreading. One night, after a gathering where the energy in the room felt like fire, Malik walked home with the old man at his side. The streets were quiet, the glow of street lamps painting long shadows. "You've become more than I imagined?" The old man said, his voice heavy with both pride and warning. Malik glanced at him. "You gave me the book. You knew this was possible."
Igo Man shook his head.
"I gave you a spark." But fire is unpredictable. You've started something that can't be contained. Not by them, and not even by you. Malik looked ahead, his jaw set. "Good. That means it's bigger than me." The old man studied him for a moment, then gave a slow nod. "Just remember, when a fire spreads, it warms, but it also burns. Choose carefully what you ignite." Malik carried those words with him, but he didn't slow down. The system responded with something he had expected but dreaded: legal war. Subpoenas arrived at his door, lawsuits filed in his name, accusations of fraud, tax evasion, illegal dealings. They dragged him into courtrooms, trying to bury him under paperwork, trying to drain him not with bullets, but with endless battles. But Malik had prepared. His networks, his architects, his careful planning, all of it shielded him one by one. The cases collapsed, judges dismissed claims, lawyers fumbled with fabricated evidence. The people saw it too. And each time Malik walked out of a court as free, the cheers grew louder. He wasn't just a man now, he was a symbol, a reminder that the system wasn't untouchable. But symbols carry targets. One night, standing alone on a rooftop overlooking the city, Malik felt the weight of it all pressing down. He thought of the families who looked to him, the enemies who wanted him erased, the thin line between survival and legacy. The storm clouds above rumbled, and in the wind, he heard the echo of the book's final warning: the third prison is fear. Malik closed his eyes, letting the rain hit his face. He wasn't afraid anymore, not of loss, not of death, not of erasure, because the truth was simple: the story was already out there. Even if they took him, They couldn't take that, and so when the time came to face the silver-haired man again, Malik was ready. The storm finally broke on a night heavy with rain when Malik was summoned once again into the lion's den. This time there were no kidnappings, no shadows. The silver-haired man wanted the meet in public. He wanted the people to see who held the power. It was staged at a hotel ballroom downtown under the guise of a community investment forum. Reporters filled the room, cameras flashed. Officials in tailored suits sat polished and comfortable. Malik walked in alone, his shoes wet from the streets, his jacket carrying the smell of rain. Every eye turned to him, some filled with disdain, others with curiosity, and many with quiet hope. The silver-haired man stood at the front, smiling with the poise of a man who had never been questioned. He raised a hand, silencing the murmurs. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to discuss the future of this city. But before we begin, our young friend has insisted on speaking. Let us humor him. A ripple of laughter moved through the room. Malik let it pass. He stepped forward, his face calm, his voice steady, the kind of voice that wasn't performing but simply telling the truth. "You call me a danger," he said, his words cutting through the air. "You call me reckless, untrustworthy, a fraud. But let me ask you, what have you built? What do you own that wasn't taken from the people sitting in neighborhoods you've stripped bare? You talk about investment, but your kind never invested in us. You extracted. You left us with dead, with chains, with scraps, and called it freedom. And now you're afraid because the people are learning the rules you hid from them." The silver-haired man's smile didn't falter, but his eyes narrowed. "Power isn't about speeches, Malik. It's about control, and control is something you don't have." Malik stepped closer, his voice rising just enough for every camera to catch. "You're right, I don't have control. The people do. That's what you fear most. You thought I was a man you could erase, but I'm not just a man anymore. I'm a mirror, and the people see themselves in me." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Reporters scribbled furiously. The silver-haired man's composure cracked for just a moment, his jaw tightening. He leaned toward Malik, whispering so low the microphones couldn't catch it. "If you keep going, we'll destroy everything you love." Malik's answer was simple. "You already tried, and I'm still here." The tension in the room snapped like a wire pulled too tight. Reporters swarmed with questions, officials shifted uncomfortably, and the silver-haired man, for the first time, looked cornered. The meeting collapsed into chaos, cameras flashing, security scrambling. But the damage was done. The footage spread before the night was over. The people saw it all, saw Malik stand unflinching, saw power challenge face to face. And something irreversible happened. Fear cracked. Hope took its place. In the weeks that followed, the city pulsed with energy. Movements grew faster than they could be stopped. Communities organized not in whispers, but in bold gatherings. Families fought evictions and won. Small businesses pooled resources to buy back property. Workers walked out of abusive jobs, demanding better. Malik wasn't leading every move. He didn't need to. The fire was already burning on its own. The system lashed back harder than ever. Banks pulled strings, politicians passed sudden laws, and the smear campaigns reached new heights. But the more they attacked, the more transparent their desperation became. People no longer saw untouchable rulers. They saw cornered predators. Malik moved carefully, never staying in one place for too long, but everywhere he went, people followed. They asked for advice, for guidance, for a voice to reassure them that the impossible wasn't impossible anymore. And every time he gave the same answer: "Don't look at me. Look at each other. The story isn't mine, it's ours." Still, Malik knew the cost of defiance. One evening, as he walked alone along the riverbank, a shot rang out. The bullet missed him by inches, slamming into the concrete wall behind him. He didn't run. He turned slowly, scanning the shadows, but whoever had fired was already gone. He touched the wall where the bullet had struck, the stone still warm. Then he whispered to the night, "You'll have to do better than that." The assassination attempt failed, but it made headlines. And instead of fear, it ignited fury. Crowds marched, chanting his name not as a savior but as a symbol of defiance. The system had tried to silence him with fire, with courts, with bullets. And still he stood. That made him untouchable in a way money never could. Months passed, and Malik's influence spread beyond the city. Other communities watched, listened, learned. His videos were translated into new languages, his words carried across oceans. He had become something larger than himself, proof that the story could be rewritten. One night, Malik returned to the rooftop where his journey had truly begun, the city glowing beneath him. The old man stood beside him, his face lined with time, his eyes soft with both pride and warning. "You've done it," the old man said quietly. "You've broken the chains. But you know what comes next?"
The Malik nodded slowly.
"They'll never stop trying. But they don't need to. I don't need to win every battle, I just need to keep the fire alive." The old man smiled faintly. "Then you've already won." Malik looked out at the city, the skyline shimmering like a living thing. He thought of the boy he had once been, running through streets where hope felt like a rumor. He thought of the book, of the hidden truths of the scars he carried. And he thought of the people, millions of them now, who no longer bowed their heads in silence. The rain began to fall again, light at first, then heavier, washing the city clean. Malik let it soak him. His face turned to the sky. He was no longer just a man. He was a story. And stories, once told, could never be erased. The money story they didn't want the people to know was no longer hidden. It was alive, beating in every street, every home, every heart that refused to surrender. Malik had given them the truth, and the truth was more powerful than any system. And so, even if tomorrow brought loss, even if tomorrow brought death, Malik knew one thing with absolute certainty: he had already won, because he had taught the people that their story was their own. The city glowed brighter, the storm roared louder, and Malik stood unshaken, a silhouette against the skyline, no longer a prisoner of money, of lies, or of fear. He was free. And so were they.